Welcome back to Ryan and Brian's Bible Bistro. I'm Ryan.
Hey, and I'm Brian.
And this is the Bible Bistro.
You forgot to give me the cue on that one. I need to work on the harmony on that one. So.
Well, I'm just freestyling as I do this, man. So I don't know. I can't be contained by a melody and a harmony.
Well, my freestyle days are over.
Yeah,
mine's more Peta style now.
I'm close enough for jazz. I'm Thelonious Monk of the Bible Bistro
don't
intro.
Get me started. Yeah.
Well, why? Because you want to talk about Thelonious Monk?
Well, I mean, we could talk about Thelonious Monk all day. I mean, how can you not? But
how can we tie theology and Thelonious together?
Speaking of which, did you see there's a new book that came out? We actually should read that together and talk about it. It's on the theology of jazz. It looks pretty cool. The gospel according to jazz, something like that. Yeah, did you see that?
I had no idea.
I'll send it to you. We'll do an episode. Stay tuned, dear listeners, for an episode.
This is what everyone's here for, is the theology according to jazz.
I'm sure that will be a really highly anticipated.
It's like a new Blue like jazz, right? No, I'm kidding. So,
anyway, I mean that was an okay book, but you're getting ready to say that we were back after a break. We took kind of a break.
We kind of took a break.
Kind of an unexpected break.
An unexpected break. Well, we recorded a bunch because we're gonna talk about. I was away for several weeks.
Both of us were traveling. Both of us
were
on
traveling.
The road.
I was working.
You were in a little bit more of
lounging.
You were in a little bit more of an exotic location than I was too. So
yes,
I was in the Redneck Riviera, and you were in Egypt.
Yeah, and and then we came back. And our schedules did not align. The stars did not align. And so we took a little bit of a break, but that's all right. Things are going on. Life happens.
It was a difficult.
But here, it was difficult.
Yes. It was, my car is still on vacation, believe it or not. Decided they wanted some more time in North Carolina.
Wanted some more time on the East Coast.
Right.
But we're back. We're here. We're recording remote. I'm in Bistro East, and you're in Bistro West.
Bistro West, yeah, or Bistro Central.
We're making it happen for our adoring fans, coast to coast.
Yeah. Here. Well, I've been excited to talk to you about your trip, and you give me a little bit of an idea, but it sounds like it was a really, really interesting trip. Tell me, so give our listeners a little bit of an idea of where you were. On this trip.
Just to recap, if you haven't listened to us in a while, so I was directing a video documentary in Egypt and Jordan with some guys from Appian Media. And so it was kind of a travel journal experience of experiencing Egypt and the path that Moses and the Israelites might have taken. So following that whole path and then finishing. So we started in Cairo, looked at some things around there, moved... eventually found our way to the Sinai Peninsula, went to Mount Sinai.
Cool.
Or the historically
one of the potential sites
of the Mount Sinai. And then we eventually worked our way through the desert in Jordan. Wadi Rum is the name there. And then we eventually found our way to Mount Nebo, where Moses would have seen the promised land. Now that he would not be entering himself, but he could go and see for himself. So it was 2 weeks of craziness.
And most people know this by now. You're a videographer. That's what you do for a living. And so this was what you were doing as a part of this kind of a documentary series, right?
Yeah. I wasn't holding the camera on this one. I was just directing, but we had a crew of 8 from here in the U.S. And then we had several. It was a big production. It was a bigger production. I mean, when you get over it, there's a lot that has to happen. And then we had to rent equipment, and so we had production assistants, Egyptian production assistants, and Jordanian. So at any time, we were anywhere from 16 to 24 people moving around.
Not like 660,000 men, not counting women and children.
I was striking no stones and getting water out of it. I didn't part any waters. I'm not an Exodus director. I'm like a cruise director.
So that's cool. So we talked to the guys on Appian Media about some of the projects they've done, and they've done some really neat stuff out there for free. And this is going to be another thing. Yeah,
this is free. So I mean, it's all crowdsourced. The funding for it.
Wow, that's cool.
And so I mean, the whole plan is to make biblically accurate material, and then produce it for the church for free. And so it
Wow,
doesn't
that's
come
cool.
from any particular church background.
Right.
It's not like they're pushing any certain theological position besides like the Bible, and just trying to and just trying to tie helping Christians today visualize the places that are mentioned in Scripture. And so this one is a little different than some of the stuff they've done in the past because their last project was the 7 churches in Asia. And so there's like very specific sites, and they can go to these ruins and they can see specific things and tie it together. And so this was a little different because this was before then.
Here is where Moses, left Egypt. This is the stone that he stepped into the Red Sea from.
Right, exactly. And so a part of this was just trying to make. It was about the experience of traveling through these places and seeing what it might have been like and reflections on that. So it was. I was really glad to get out of the Middle East when I got back.
Well, was it not an exciting? I mean, was it not? Kind of a lifetime experience,
absolutely.
Right? I mean,
it was fantastic. I saw things that I would never see or experience otherwise. I just wouldn't.
Sure,
I don't.
sure.
Part of this was not just going tourist style, but kind of like we're going to experience Egypt here. And so
and you did,
and I did.
Good.
And I'm not going to do part of it again. I might do some other parts of it again.
The next time you go, you're going more as a tourist. Is that the idea?
Absolutely. I mean, so I'm just going to say I'm just going to talk about one thing because we're going to talk about some of the biblical things.
Sure.
But we rode, we talked about this. We rode a VIP train. Okay. So as we would say, a VIP train, very important. This is like sleeper car trains.
Okay.
And it's an experience I will never forget, and not in a good way. It was hot. It was so hot, and air conditioner was broke, so it was like 80 degrees. We're supposed to be sleeping, and then
this is night. You're saying?
No, this is night. Yeah, so it's already been baking in the sun all day. Oh, man. And then they're driving. I don't think the trains have like gas and brake pedals like a traditional car, but they drove it like it did. And so it was like, go real fast, slam on the brakes, go real fast, slam on the brakes. And so we rode it on or off, and we rode that for 12 hours. It was part of the story. I mean, part of the story is trying different travel ways through Egypt.
Is that how many people, Egyptian people, were on this? I mean, is this a normal means of transportation for a lot of the Egyptian people?
So this train had more sleeper cars on it, but there were other trains that were there through the station, and yes, I mean the Egyptians rode it, but they weren't using sleeper cars. I mean, it was just
they're just kind of packing
packed, very much packed in there, and even our Egyptian crew was like, "Yeah, this is a last resort."
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and it was. So we had a fixer on site there, and the fixer's job is when we're there on site, he's supposed to have things lined up.
Yeah.
He was trying to make sure with the producer of it, saying like, "Are you sure you want to ride the train? Are you sure you want to ride the train?" And it was like only like an extra $30 a ticket for each of us if we wanted to fly. Because flying
he's looking at you guys like, what are you
doing?
About?
Like, you're spending all this money coming over here, and you're going to spend an extra $30 a person to fly the plane, because the plane is a 30-minute plane ride, and the train is a 12-hour train ride where you don't eat the food. He's like, don't eat the food because you're going to get sick. And so we've been out in the heat. We're already gross. Then we're getting on this hot train at night. Don't eat the food.
Goodness. He's like, what are you guys thinking?
Yeah, he was kind of, and we got off, and he's like, so how was the VIP train, guys? I mean, he rode with us.
He did.
Was there. He was there too.
He flew and
I'll meet you at the station. He should have flown. If I were him, I would have been like, I got you on the train. I'll see you at the station. Because
if you make it, so.
if you make it. So anyway, that was one cultural experience I'll never have again.
And I will say, when we travel, we do like to experience some of the local culture. Yeah, but sometimes you go, it's like, well, maybe I don't need to experience this again. So I've had that experience.
Yeah. So, but again, I saw amazing things. We spoke to some amazing people. The people there were very welcoming. All of them asked if we would adopt them. Some of them typically, and put them on our luggage.
And they meant it? They were like serious, or
okay. Our last night one of the last nights we were there, we were
Right.
in Jordan, and we were at a decently nice hotel, and there's a wedding, and they're coming through, and this wedding's happening, and they're like, they want us there, and this guy comes up, and he's like, hey, where are you from? We're like, American. He goes, take me with you. He's like standing there with his wife, and he's like, take me with you. I can fit in your luggage. And I'm like, okay.
Wow.
Here we are.
Just because there's difficult things going on there in Egypt and stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
poverty.
Poverty. I mean, Egypt is. It's a country that's torn. So one of the interviews we did the very first day, and we'll get into this. So when we were in Cairo, we talked to this young girl, and when I say young girl, she's in her 20s. She was like a reporter there, and we said, tell us about Cairo, and she's like, well, which one? And there's ancient and there's modern. There's secular and religious. There's it's this country that's trying to find itself in a certain way, and so
there's different economic. Like there's higher level economics and
I mean,
because I was thinking about, you remember when we had our friend Josh Sharif on, and of course he had probably a completely different kind of experience,
cultural experience than I did. Yes,
it'd be interesting to talk to him about it sometime. That'd be interesting to hear you guys talk about that.
It was before I even got over there, I was and it's one of those things as a production crew. I mean, we were obviously very visible. Right. We had police that were with us everywhere we went with fully automatic weapons, which was interesting. Also, but it was everybody was just very welcoming. Everywhere we went, we stopped along the side road. There was a family making like a bread for their family in this very kind of ancient traditional oven that they had out there, and they were so glad we were there and gave us bread and like brought out this cheese and it was very
that's cool.
I will say this: it was very community oriented. You know what I mean? Like it's very much to take care of each other.
You felt welcomed in that kind
absolutely,
of stuff.
Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
It was great in that way.
Well, tell me a couple things then. So give me some idea of some of the sites that you saw that you thought were just really interesting. That and I don't know how much you can tell us about.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much because some of it's going to come out in the video.
Yeah,
spill the beans. So when we got there, we spent a couple days in Cairo.
Okay.
And so Cairo for us was, again, it was just trying to figure out what was Egypt like today, you know what I mean, and get a sense of it today. So Cairo has 20 million people in it, so it's huge, and it's
what's that equivalent to in the U.S.? Is that like, I'm trying to think what cities that size.
Chicago's got like 6 million.
I thought it was more than that. Okay. Wow.
Okay. I don't know, but it's
20
big.
million, that's big. Yeah.
It's a big city.
I'm Googling right now. Population of Chicago. So
every building has rebar sticking out of the top of it, so they can just build on top. So they can just attach to the next level and go up. And so that was, it was busy, packed streets, lots of, like life at all hours there, dogs and cats everywhere.
Right.
So it didn't have a lot of biblical significance, but we wanted to get a sense of
it's just the population of Chicago is 2.697 million. Can that be possible?
Well, add the suburbs in there. It just
okay. That's what you're saying. Yeah, it's Chicago proper. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a huge. You're saying it's a huge city.
It's huge,
a big city. Okay.
Absolutely huge city. And they have car lanes, but there's no one follows them. I mean, it's a free for all, traffic wise. But so that was really interesting to experience that. And while we were there, we went to Giza and we saw the Great Pyramids, which was very interesting. Of course, this is what you're going to see now. What that has to do with Moses is, not a whole lot. We didn't do a lot of filming there, or any filming there. Partly because it was an earlier dynasty. But we talked about, part of the group is, if you're an Israelite slave, like you go to bed and you wake up in the shadow of these great pyramids, that had spiritual significance to the Egyptians, and so we got to go into one of the pyramids, which. Another one of those experiences I'll never do again.
Really?
It was very
I've always thought that, as I was a kid, that's something I would really. What was it? Well, did you see a mummy or something, or you're kind of scared off by the spirit of Tutankhamun?
I mean, I almost died in there, but
really,
well, part of it is.
Was it kind of an Indiana Jones thing, or
it was kind of an Indiana Jones thing for me? I'm not a small cat. Okay,
I'm like 6'4". You're very tall. Big frame.
And apparently these Egyptians who built these huge monumental structures could not dig a tunnel bigger than 4 foot by 4 foot square to get into them.
Right.
So it was it was a wild experience to go
so
into
you're kind
it.
of
And also
been over most of the time.
I was been over most of the time for like 100 meter, not 100 meters, like 40 meters into this place, and it was rough. But also, early dynasty, there's no hieroglyphs on the walls inside. So there was nothing.
Just plain,
It was just like plain. It's like you walk in, you went through this. You're physically dying. You're in a room that's really hot. There's nothing on the walls, and then there's just a stone sarcophagus.
Okay,
No mummy.
These are your travel tips from Ryan Sarver. If you think you're going to see,
no, but here's the thing: we went into the not the Great Pyramid, but the one that was his son's. Now I've heard the Great Pyramid is much more impressive to go into.
Really?
But we went in the son's. So that's a hot travel tip for you. Don't go in the suns unless you like being squeezed in half and walking down. Anyway,
and not see anything when you get there. So.
You not see anything when you get there. So we saw the Sphinx as well. So it was part of it for us while we were there. It's just to get a sense of what is Egypt like, And it was this. The call to prayer is coming out. This is before, the pyramids are built before Islam has come through and so forth, or Islam is even a thing.
Right.
But it's this weird dichotomy that you're hearing the call to prayer constantly, and you're in like these other religious things, and so it's this weird mashup of what's going on there in Cairo.
So like kind of ancient religion, and then the more recent religions, and that kind of thing.
and it's an ancient religion that they're embracing, at least from a financial standpoint. You know what I mean? Like it's a very much a celebrated ancient religion. But Islam is much more the driving faith there at the time. So that was really interesting. And one of the things that we did while there, we also went on the Nile. Now this was really interesting. Cool. So part of the thing when we're getting ready to shoot is it takes us a while to get set up. You know, like we're nothing happens quickly. Partly because it's Egypt, and we have these Egyptian PAs and translating English to language translation. But while we were waiting, there was a man that was kind of waiting up, not waiting. He was making coffee. Like he sits up there, and this guy has made coffee on the street. I mean, this is very much like on the street making coffee. And this is like a very traditional thing. Everybody's kind of got like a little spot along the street. They're doing something. And he had made coffee there for 30 years. Over 30 years.
Holy cow.
And we started talking to him, and the Nile's right there, and we started talking to him about the Nile. And this is something that we all found really interesting is he was just talking about like how the Nile is life. Like the Nile is like the spirit of Egypt. It like it's bringing physical life, and it's a spiritual life, and it's everything. And then at one point he said, I'll go get a drink of it. And he got this cup, and then we're like, no, it's dirty. You're like, no, you don't need to do this for us. But I mean, it was for him as a way to say like it was so much life. And then at one point we also rode on a boat, like a traditional, they called a flecka boat. It's a sailboat, and we spoke to the captain that was in charge of that boat, and we talked about the Nile again, and it was life. It was life. Like the Nile held such a special value. And then for our purposes, as we're creating this documentary, it's also, the Nile was also death for the Israelites. Right. You know what I mean? It was this.
It's where the Hebrew babies were supposed to be thrown.
Hebrew babies, this is how Moses got in the water. Right. Is just like, it was this thing that for them, and I think, as we know from ancient religion, it was worshipped as well, but it was this thing that was bringing life to the Egyptians, but it was also the bringer of death to the Hebrews. I
think we've talked about this before. I a lot of times when I'm talking about this, people picture Egypt just desert. And let me ask you, was there vegetation and growth along the Nile? Could you see the difference?
So this is this is one thing that really kind of blew us away. So like even Giza, which is I'm going to say a suburb of Cairo.
Okay.
It's like green, and it's like there's green stuff around, all that stuff, and then you get to Giza, and it's almost like water got shut off, and it's desert. Like the pyramids are in desert, but then it's like it's like this oasis of desert out there, and so I mean it's very stark
Sure.
as you get off of the river.
You can see this. I do this when I teach about Egypt and the importance of the Nile River for the agriculture there, because the flooding of the Nile is what makes it possible to grow crops there. And in the ancient world, and even I think to a certain extent today, Egypt was the breadbasket of the Mediterranean world.
Absolutely.
They would grow wheat and they would have bread and stuff. And if you look at satellite photos of this part of the world, you can see the Nile River Delta from satellite. So it's completely surrounded by desert.
It's almost like
yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh, I can see where the water stops.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, and it really goes from vegetation to desert very,
that's interesting.
Very quickly.
Because like I said, I've always, just for me from satellite photos, I've looked at that, but it's interesting that you saw that there in person. That's great. Yeah. Interesting.
So we did that, and then we went to a place called Tel El Daba, which is about 3 hours north. Which is an adventure
north from
itself.
Cairo. You're saying
North of kind of northeast of Cairo.
Okay.
So
that would
again,
be toward, help me out. So that's toward like where today the Gaza Strip, we would call it. It'd be
not that far east, but north, kind of northeast. Yeah,
but in the direction of Israel and Gaza and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we went up there, and the reason we went up there is there's been some excavation, because I think one of this is for those who. There's been a lot of, where's the archaeology of the Hebrews? Where's the archaeology
of the Exodus and that,
of the Exodus? Where's it at?
Right.
And so at Tel Daba, there's been this excavation there, and what they've noticed is they've pulled some of the stuff out is from the Middle Kingdom. So this is like 1500 BC or so forth. This has also been like also known as Avaris, like a major city of Egypt. And as they've dug up, what they've noticed and they've found is that there's a blending of Egyptian and like Syrian and Canaanite buildings and structures.
Okay.
And it's kind of going, well, how did that get here? It's one of those things. And so there's been other things, and then there's a statue which we didn't get to see that they found out, that they've pulled out, and it's been a statue that it has. I mean, there's lots of archaeologists looking at this that has the features of someone that would have not been Egyptian, but they think it might have been Joseph.
Really?
A statue, like, because, he was had a high place, and they were thinking this might have been a cluster of Hebrews up in this area. And so the housing, the buildings and all that stuff have this kind of Canaanite, it's a blending of the two cultures there. And if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken here, I believe they found some like early Canaanite Semitic language stuff, like written on some pottery stuff there. So,
of course, again, as from a biblical standpoint, we see Joseph and his family coming down. Jacob and his family coming down after Joseph has this really profound effect. Yeah, and the Bible says is made second in charge of all of Egypt during that period of time. So the question is, where do we see this? Historically,
yeah, and it was a tall. I mean, it would have been a very from what we've read is it would have been very unusual to have a statue of someone like this that wasn't very important, but the features of the statue do not match traditional Pharaoh-esque features. So there's some thought that this is potentially, been a Hebrew colony there in Egypt. So we went up there and shot some stuff. It was really interesting. Egypt is an interesting place. I mean, obviously you're living, ancient history is all around you. Right. And so it's just like, oh, we stopped here and now the grass is growing. Because they're digging. They just stopped digging. And so the grass started growing here because it wasn't full desert. But I mean, there's walls. I mean, we were in the structures. I mean, you could see the ancient walls there, and you're kind of going, how old are these? These walls are 3,500, 4,000 years old, and you're walking in these structures, and you can walk up on the walls and so forth. And so
what were they built out of? Is it kind of brick, or was it?
It was kind of like a stone mortar, kind of layered up there. I mean, you could go up and pull. I mean, it was just weird because you could go up and just touch it and like, oh, I want a piece of this wall from 4,000 years ago.
Although I think you're really not supposed to do that.
I don't think you're supposed to do that, but I'm going to tell you,
there's nobody watching you. Huh?
There's no one. Again, like we pulled up to this, and it is. like there's a school, we can hear school children over here. And I mean, it's like a regular field out behind someone's house. And you're like, what's going on here? And you're like, oh, wait, there's a 4,000-year-old wall that would have been structures here and so forth. So we did that one day, which was really, this is a really, really interesting thing.
Interesting. Tell me the name of that again. Was Tel
El Daba.
Okay.
TEL. And then EL-DABA.
And Tel, we'll go. Most of our listeners know this, but Tel is basically the name for these mounds. They're not naturally occurring hills. They're referred to this idea that there was habitation there for generations, and so it builds up basically as houses are destroyed or they build one on top of the other. This kind of thing, it builds up these mounds, and that's where the archaeologists could tell here's a place to dig because this was a place where there's been a long period of time where there's been people living. That's what the word Tel means, really, and you'll see that word is used all over the Middle East and Near East in reference to these places. Long time city of habitation there, basically. So interesting.
So we did that, and then we took the train down to
the one you've already talked about,
the
VIP,
the VIP train down to PTSD. There were so many things I can't even talk about. I just can't.
I guess we should have another recording.
For our patrons.
For patrons. There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
Patrons is the chance. Sign up, everybody.
If you want the stories that Ryan can't tell for public consumption.
Well, the crew and I have talked about making a podcast that's like deep cut.
Just for yourselves.
Well, for ourselves and maybe a few trusted about what really happened in Egypt.
Oh, my.
Anyway, so then we took a train down to Luxor, which is where the Valley of the Kings is. So this is like what I would think is where the classic Egyptian culture. So this is where King Tutankhamun's tomb was found in the Valley of the Kings. We didn't go to any of that. We went to the
wrong time. Is it wrong time period? Is that what the idea is, or is it just?
We just didn't have a lot of time. I mean, part of the thing was we wanted to establish the gods of Egypt, but the focus was not the gods of Egypt and the pharaohs. So but in this region, we also went to the Temple of Karnak, Karnak Temple, which is a temple that was built to Amun-Ra, the god of the sun god.
Yeah.
And so we had an Egyptologist join us who was fantastic. I mean, this is a guy, he had done stuff for National Geographic, written some books, had a PhD in this. And this is the kind of guy.
Remember his name or?
Muhammad.
Sorry.
I don't know.
Not nice to put you on the spot. Sorry.
Yeah. Don't do that, Brian. Listen, I just gotten off a train. I'm not remembering anything. Stop. I've missed my whipping boy.
Wow, do I sound that old?
Yeah,
I suddenly came across this as Mr. Burns, or what's the name of the guy, the bank guy on It's a Wonderful Life. That's one.
Gotcha.
I'm
anyway,
sure our listeners are shouting at their listening device right now.
Cratchit.
No,
I don't know.
That's a different Christmas thing. So, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes.
So the Egyptologist was really interesting there at the Temple of Karnak. For those who remember,
which is huge. Again, like nothing in Egypt is small. But it's what's really interesting about this place is we met with him, and I don't want to give away too much here, but it's this whole balance of light and dark. And this temple was built very intentionally. And so at the winter solstice, the sun comes up perfectly, like where this thing is, and it just bathes this whole very long hallway in light. And this is when people came to worship. And it was this combination of light.
Oh, because the sun, and this is when the sun's coming back, and
the sun's coming up, and the angle that it comes up, they've lined this temple up perfectly. So when it comes up, the sun is low in the sky, and it just shoots right through the middle of this temple. It was unbelievable. But what's interesting, and let me back up. Before we went to this temple, before we went to the Temple of Karnak, we did some traditional brick making So like the Hebrews would have done. So
right. That was the whole thing. In Exodus chapter 2, you have Moses watching them at their hard labor, and then in chapter 3, when he asked for them to be forgiven from work in order to go worship, the Pharaoh makes it even more difficult for them, right?
Yes.
So they have to gather their own straw and this kind of thing.
So we went and we had a little bit of experience there. So, I mean, again, this is intense manual labor. So they're making these bricks, and they're still making bricks the same way. And one of the interview questions the
same way as they did
same way.
You're talking about like 15th century,
Same
wow.
way. Out of the mud. So, I mean, they've talked to like, here's the mud. They've got the hose running. They're putting some water on it. And then they're throwing straw over the top of it.
Oh, wow.
And they're mixing it with sand. And then there's guys in there like digging up these big pieces of mud, and they're trying to get the rocks out, get all the pebbles out. And then this guy's over here, and they've got this form, and they're basically squatting on the ground all day, making these forms and laying them out. And then they just lay them out in the sun.
And that bakes them. That makes them hard.
Yeah. And then there's this old crotchety. I mean, this is not a tourist site,
right?
Right. We were like deep in Egypt at this point. This crotchety truck comes up, and I mean, and there's kids there, and they're throwing bricks up there. I mean, they're loading up to go build with this stuff. They're
building houses and building like
absolutely
all kinds of stuff with it, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Today, you're saying this is current.
This is a business today. Now there are places that make them machine-made bricks, but this is like in this region they're still doing it the old way. They're still making bricks by hand with mud, with water.
So you said it was labor intensive. Anything else you noticed about it that you thought was particularly interesting, or just?
It smelled.
Because of the mud and all that kind of stuff.
Mud, yeah. I mean, there's animals, donkeys. I mean, it was just.
Okay.
I mean, it was, and as it's true, Egypt is a hot place. Like it is very hot, and we got there middle of the day, and I mean, this is like hard, labor intense.
Are they working quickly? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, they've got it down to a science. I mean, they know how to do it.
I was thinking about the whole quota. That was again in the Exodus, the whole idea that this is your quota. You need to have this many every day, and that kind of thing.
But I mean, it is just watching these. I mean, they're up to their, the thighs in mud. And I mean, he's reaching down and getting this big armful, and he's just digging, trying to find rocks and pebbles. And there's 3 or 4 guys over there doing it. And I mean, they do have a quota. We didn't ask, but I mean, they knew how to do it. I mean, but this is their job
every day, right?
Every day is to come in there and make. And we had 2 guys making these mud bricks, and they just did row after row. And I mean, these guys are literally squatting down on the ground all day.
Wow.
And they're all covered in mud. I mean, this is it's dirty, it's hot, it's labor intensive.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
So anyway, they're still making, but that kind of ties back to the Karnak temple. Is when you go in there, they don't know exactly what it is. Some of it think it's a ramp or it's something else that was there, but it is still using those bricks. So there is there's the classic kind of limestone where everything, the beautiful material, but then you go inside and there's still stuff so they don't know if it was used to help facilitate the building, like this would have been used to facilitate the building. They also are saying like, but again, like the Egyptologist was saying, like there's some signs that maybe there's something Semitic, like Jews would have had something. And they wouldn't be Jews yet, but the Hebrew people would have had something here. So that was really interesting. You go in there, there's still these ancient bricks, and they're still there, even though they're mud and straw, because it doesn't rain. Like it's hot. The sun is out.
Yeah, so
and you're just in it. But I think one of the most interesting things for me is he took us into the Holy of Holies. And so, again, remember, this is a temple. This is where worship is happening to Amun-Ra. And, they had this Holy of Holies. So remember, it's all about light. But in the Holy of Holies, it's dark. And when the sun comes up the sun comes up in the winter solstice, it gets illuminated. The way that but otherwise, it's very dark in there. And so only the high priest would go in there and he'd offer sacrifices.
Right.
And they would offer sacrifices of all kinds of animals and so forth, except a ram. Because a ram was a physical manifestation of Ra.
Wow. Okay.
So what I loved about our Egyptologist is he was not only was he's a Muslim, but he also
Right.
knew the Hebrew Bible, and so he said,
Right.
what kind of brings this connection and what makes this interesting? He's like, if you look in Exodus, and I'm going to read it here, Exodus 8:26, but Moses said, talking about the sacrifices they bring, he said that would not be right. The sacrifices we offer the Lord our God would be detestable to the Egyptians,
Right.
and if we offer sacrifices that are detestable in their eyes, will they not stone us? And so
this
he
is
talks
him
about
talking
like
to Pharaoh, right? Moses is talking
Yeah.
to Pharaoh at this point. Okay.
Yeah, so-
and then he's saying, "Let us go out and worship in the wilderness."
let them worship
kind of
out
thing.
because our sacrifice would be detestable because, you know, he's also thought is, you know, you go back to Abraham and Isaac and that God provided a ram,
Yeah.
as a substitute. And so the Hebrews would have sacrificed rams, which would have been detestable to the Egyptians.
Interesting.
Because it was a physical manifestation of Ra.
I've never heard that. That's fascinating. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he showed us that, and then he took us to, it's called the Shishak Wall.
Okay.
You know, and so on this is as opposed to the pyramids, which were early dynasty and didn't have the cool hieroglyphics. This had tons of cool hieroglyphics on it, like it was really cool stuff. They had these huge columns, and you could still see color on them because they were colored. And so again, no rain, it's not washing with this color, but you know, they're telling a story as well. And so they had what took us to the Shishak Wall, which was a pharaoh who had led a campaign against Judah and Jerusalem, and that's in like 1 Kings 14, like 1 Kings 14 and 2 Chronicles. And so he's showing us, and it talks about the leaders of the tribes and so forth, and you know, so you have this written on this wall in the Temple of Karnak. And one of the things that was really interesting that the Egyptologist said to us, he's like, you know, there are plenty of people that want to say, like, there's no evidence of the Hebrews here or the Hebrew, you know, like all this stuff. But he's like, it's here. It's written on the walls. You know, his whole thing is like, you know, the specifics and so forth. He's like, I can't argue with that. But he's like, the Hebrews being here is, they were here.
To say that there was no evidence of this at all is
no evidence at all. He's like, you know, we don't. And you know, we talked about like, was there evidence of talking about the plagues and stuff? And he's like, there was some. He's like, you know, again, Egyptians. Pharaohs don't like to talk about defeats or, you know, they don't usually record that like, oh, this happened to us and, you know, we lost. But he's like, there are things that are written that seem in other places. He's like, you know, it may not be how we would have described, like the Bible describes it, but there seems to be some things that there's some correlation there between the.
Yeah, we haven't talked about this a ton, but there's a way of approaching the Old Testament we could call something like historical minimalism, where basically people saying, oh, these are all just stories that are made up later by the peoples in order to, you know, like the Israelite people in order to explain their situation, this kind of thing. But, you know, that's a historical minimalist saying, oh, it just never happened. But what he's saying is, no, there is definitely evidence here that something, again, I can't say the specifics. I can't, you know, give you that's fascinating. And this is, like you said, this guy that's a Muslim and seems like a pretty interesting scholar.
He was a guy that you know, it was, you just let him go. You know what I mean? Like as a director, you know, just like you just ask him a question and then it's just like, all right, run the cameras. He's just going.
Right. You don't do that with me. You don't let me do that. So
well, Brian, sometimes you need a little more direction. We get rants about the nature of time. I'm just kidding.
Oh goodness,
it was good. It was good. I'm kidding.
Yeah, whatever.
So anyway,
yeah, that's cool. Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say that sounds really interesting. I can't wait to see
there,
that.
We went to Mount Sinai. So and we climbed Mount Sinai, or the traditional site. So we had a Bedouin that led us up Mount Sinai. We hiked it really fast because of some situations, which you'll find out in the documentary. And we got to be up there for sunset, and we slept up there. So we recorded some stuff there. We saw the sun setting over the valley. I mean, it was just beautiful. Now, this is, I mean, when you get in the Sinai Peninsula, we saw Saudi Arabia as we drove. You know what I mean? Like you could see, you're kind of in this corner. You can see Saudi Arabian stuff, but it is desert. Like we have moved away from the Nile, obviously.
Wilderness. Yeah.
We are wilderness. Right. I'm a person who drinks a lot of water, and so it was one of these places where you started kind of going like, you don't leave your mouth open while you're, because you just dry out. I mean, it's just like you're in the desert, you're firmly planted in the desert. And so we climbed Mount Sinai with some Bedouins, and then what's really interesting on the path, they have like little shops. You can ride a camel up part of it, and you can ride a donkey up another part, but they've got like convenience stores halfway up them. Yeah, so I mean. Again, there's a lot of backstory here that I'm not going to share, but the whole plan is like you're supposed to walk it like in 4.5 hours to get to the top.
Right.
And so you take this leisurely path, and it's like, oh, here's Bedouin convenience store number 1. And it's, it's made, like a mud brick thing. But if they got like, oh, you want a Coke? You can buy a Coke. You want some water and so forth. And you rest, and they'll make you tea. And then you go a little bit more and you do it. So you can rest. And then the last part of it is 750 steps up. And they call them steps. That's what they call them. I don't call them steps.
What do you call them?
I call them boulders. There's nothing steps. Like we think steps. Like how many inches up? This is like this step is 24 inches and this one's 6. It's like
so it's like climbing.
Blast your energy. So anyway, we get to the top,
and you're trying to do it because to get the sunset. Is that what it is?
We're trying to get up there for sunset. We got delayed because of stuff you'll find out in the documentary. And so we got up there. We were all blitzed, but got some beautiful shots. Cool. It was very cool to be up there.
Yeah, and then you got sunrise the next day. Then is what
got sunrise. Yeah, so it was cool. Really cool up there as the sun goes down, and I mean it's just like a perfect. I don't know, like a balance, teeter-totter. Sun goes down, moon comes up on the other side of the valley.
Oh, wow. Because it was like a full moon or something like that.
99% full moon, yeah.
Wow.
And so it was just like, oh, there's the sun, here's the moon. And
were
so
there other people up there camping, or just you guys?
So at night, there's typically not. Okay. There are a couple other people, but again, there's a convenience store up there that they make you food. But we had them,
yeah, so it's not camping like,
Well, yeah. Again, deep cut on a podcast. I can say some other things. But the Bedouins made us like this beautiful chicken dinner. Like they grilled over charcoal up there.
Oh, cool.
We had this great meal, and then we pulled out these mats and had camel hair blankets that we slept under the moon for that night. Wow. And so, but in the morning there are tons of people up there because it's like a popular thing to be up there. So we're trying to sleep, and at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., there's people flapping their jaws. Anyway, coming up. I guess they can do that. So we did that, and we saw the sun come up then.
That's
cool. It was really cool. And then we came down, and we went to a place that we have referenced on this podcast.
Yeah.
And it was St. Catherine's Monastery.
That would be for me a place that I would like to see in my life. I would like to go to St. Catherine's Monastery.
St. Catherine's Monastery. So
do you remember where we where did we reference that, Ryan? I mean, I know you know, but
we were talking about the Bible,
right?
And finding the reliability of Scripture, because. I'm going to say, I know his name, Constantine von Tischendorf.
And you made fun of me the first time I said that. And see, now you know it.
No, I'm not making fun of you. I'm making fun of the name. I mean, you know what I mean?
Von Tischendorf?
I mean,
there's a perfectly good name.
Yeah, he's like a Dracula slayer. You know what I mean? Could you see, like...
Yeah, von Tischendorf. Okay, yeah.
Or like, a knight, Constantine von Tischendorf. So, like in a jousting game. Anyway.
So tell them, St. Catherine's is the place where what was
St. Catherine's Monastery. So again, the whole mountain of Mount Sinai and St. Catherine's, it's the Bedouins, so the Bedouins kind of led monks early on to the base of Mount Sinai.
Right.
And these Christian monks established this monastery there.
One of the oldest monasteries in the world. And this. So when you talk about the traditional side of Mount Sinai, there's some disagreement on this, and there's some,
some say it's in Saudi Arabia,
right? If you go to the History Channel, you'll find all kinds of really interesting things and that kind
ancient
of thing.
Aliens did it, yeah.
But this traditional site, St. Catherine's Monastery has been there a long time. So it has been a place that has been established as a traditional site. This isn't just like in 1940 somebody said, "Oh, we need some place to send the tourists," but it's an old site. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So so again, we didn't film there, but we had a chance just to go through it quickly. We'd come down off Mount Sinai. We were exhausted, but I'm like, we got to go in here.
Yeah.
Partly because I got to take some photos for you. Like I've been here. I've been inside. But it was perfect because you went in there. There's a nice little convenience store. They had some lovely ice cream and bottles of water for us, which we did enjoy after hiking Mount Sinai, which was very intense. So, but then we went inside, and so we saw the burning bush. It was still very green for all this time later.
Not necessarily on fire. Huh?
Yeah. And then we got to go inside their chapel area. And the chapel there was really, this is Eastern Orthodox. Am I correct? Yeah. Eastern Orthodox?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're Eastern Orthodox. That's a good question. No, I thought it was Roman Catholic, but yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, there may be both. Yeah.
But there were there were plenty of icons inside.
Sure,
and then they had these doors.
Eastern
Orthodox. Yeah. I was going to say icons. But they had these doors in there from Justinian era, so it's like 4 AD.
Okay.
I mean, they had like it was like you got into the chapel and it was like no photos because part of it was the flash. I mean, you couldn't take photos once you like just inside the chapel area there. But it is still a functioning monastery, and the monks still do take care of the area. But they also had, then you could go see the rare documents where they had they had a page from the Sinaiticus.
Sinaiticus, you can call it whatever you want. I call it Sinaiticus.
Remind everyone what it is, what Constantine von Tischendorf found.
And you're right, it is Eastern Orthodox. I just looked it up. But so Sinaiticus, so von Tischendorf's whole thesis was kind of this idea. He was looking for very old manuscripts, and he got to thinking about, it's like you said, it's very dry there. So manuscripts don't survive well in places where there's lots of moisture. They tend to mold and mildew. I mean, you guys have seen old books, or when you go into a used bookstore, kind of that smell you get. But
that's why the Dead Sea Scrolls survived.
Exactly. It's the same thing. And so that was part of it. And then the other thing, he was thinking, where have we had a community of Christians for a long period of time, in a continuous nature? And so St. Catherine's Monastery, he went there looking for old manuscripts, and pretty soon he discovered there were all kinds of really old texts there. And this is, you can read his own. He gave a report of his own trip there and this kind of thing. Some people say you have to take it with a grain of salt, and there's some differing stories on this. But however it happened, he ended up discovering this what we now consider to be the oldest complete manuscript of the New Testament, mostly complete manuscript of the New Testament, that we call Codex Sinaiticus. So in your Bibles from time to time, I'll just say that Codex Sinaiticus. And so before there was this one called Alexandrinus and Vaticanus, and these other old manuscripts. But he said this one's older than all of them, and it seems like he was probably right on that, based on the way the letters were formed and various other things. But in your Bibles, when you come across this from time to time in modern translations, it bothers people. They'll say, we've talked about this before in 1 John 3, for example, or in now I'm forgetting all the places, but in various places. John chapter 7:53 through 8:11, for example. It'll have a line there and say, oldest and most reliable manuscripts do not contain, John 7:53 through 8:11, and that's what it's talking about. It's talking about these ancient codices for the most part, and so end of Mark 16, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's really fascinating. That's why I want to go there and see that.
They had a page of it there.
Is it worth going there and seeing? Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I will say this again. We toured Egypt and Jordan in a way that was not
your typical
for. It wasn't to just enjoy and drink it in. You know what I mean? It was, we had a job. I mean, and we did our job, as to shoot some stuff. But
and you're telling a story, telling a particular kind of story.
We could have gone. I could have spent some more time. Some more time there. And again, there are There were monks there that would talk to you and lead you through some of these things and show you and talk to you about that stuff. I mean, there's not like a massive amount to see there, but what there is to see there is worth seeing.
Worth seeing, yeah. Very old.
Yeah,
very
so that
ancient.
was really cool for me to to come down and and even you sent us you sent me an article recently where they think there's even more ancient texts because as Islam kind of took over the region. They became more isolated there at St. Catherine's, and so like they started erasing some things on paper, on papyrus.
Yeah, it's called called pamphlet. It's a thing, and they because it's so valuable, they write over it with a different manuscript
because they couldn't get stuff. They were kind of isolated, and they're finding now with like some new imaging, they're finding some like ancient dead languages that they thought didn't exist on some of these. So it's an interesting place. It's this beautiful monastery in a valley right next to a mountain.
When you talk about places being unique, I mean, it is a unique place. I mean, there is no other place like it. So interesting. Yeah.
Yep. So we went from there.
To experience that. I hope I get to.
It was very cool. So from there, we took a ferry across the Red Sea.
Wow.
So
okay.
Yeah. It was wow. It was wow. It was wow.
Is the Red Sea pretty? Is it a beautiful place?
It is beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it is very beautiful. It's we're on you go out on this boat and you can see both sides of it. I mean, it is a large body of water. But it was beautiful. Yeah, it was beautiful. So we saw that, and that took us into Jordan. Then, so we left Egypt and went into Jordan. And we went to our first stop was at Wadi Rum, which is wilderness. So part of this was like we were in like the Sinai Peninsula is very. There's some plain area to it, but I mean, there's a lot of mountainous things. When you get into this area of Jordan, across the Red Sea, Wadi Rum area, there are mountains, but it is like vast stretches of just sand and desert. You get into these big, and this would have been. I mean, this was as pure of desert as I think we could have imagined.
Okay.
And so it was. It's one of these places where. It's very popular for Hollywood. They shoot movies there. Dune is shot there.
Right.
While we were out there.
Is this Tatooine? Is this for Star Wars geeks? This is Tatooine.
Star Wars,
is where,
Tatooine. And while we were out there were trucks moving stuff out there, getting ready to start Dune 2 very soon. So we could hear them a distance off constructing the set for Dune 2. But this is a huge desert. And so we had to have Bedouins. We had to have native people that led us through there, because one of the things is you can get lost very easily. And so for me, like I think the most important thing for me in this place is understanding the people's desire. This is we talked about the Nile, and the lushness of it, and you get into Wadi Rum. I mean, Sinai was difficult, and then you get into this area of this desert, and it is dry. And I mean, it's one of these things that, so we got up very early to beat the sun, so we're up, we're finding our place. And so by 10:30 or 11, it's like, we got to get inside. It's so hot. We're dressed for this. Everybody's like, get in out of the sun. It's hard to shoot video at that point as well, but we want to get in and rest. And then we're going out for getting ready for sunset. So, we're using the sun on both sides because it's so hot. The sun is so intense. Okay. And it is, you get out there, there's no vegetation. Okay. I mean, it is, and I think about the story of people complaining, like, did you bring us out here to die?
Yeah, you brought us out into the wilderness to die. Yeah, right.
And like for me, when I think of wilderness, I think of trees. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Right.
You know what I mean? Growing up, in,
but you're saying there's nothing out there.
There's nothing.
Okay.
And there's very little. You can't hide from the sun. Mm-hmm.
So that is interesting because we're always like, why did they want to go back? Because take us back to Egypt. Wasn't it great when we were there in Egypt and we had anything we wanted to eat and we were in the shade of the Nile and all? That's interesting. So you're saying the contrast, you could really see that.
It was it was okay. And I mean, it's just just moving through it. It's sand, you know what I mean? Like walking through sand is hard and it's hot, and and we've had a good breakfast and we've got water and we're in trucks, right? And Land Rovers and so forth, and you're just like, get me in the thing and get me back, like get me out of here.
There's sand people out there, and it's like...
yeah, absolutely. They were everywhere, and I'm like, I don't have any spare parts. So it was, so we were in Wadi Rum. It was beautiful, but at the same time, like, I can enjoy the beauty because I'm in a vehicle. But at the same time, it's like, this is a place. I had air. Well, yeah. Basically, we're right in the back of trucks that were like open air trucks, and so it's just like, oh, the air conditioning is dry faster. So I mean, we're out there, and so it drove home to me, like, if I wasn't in that, I'm just thinking, like, if I'm on foot, even if I've got an animal, I'm thinking, like, this is my death.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I can, some of these precipices we went on, beautiful. You're just like, this is my death. Like, there's nowhere to find water. There's nowhere to find shade. Like, it was. It'd be terrifying. You know what I mean?
If you've been raised in, and it's 400 years they were in Egypt. They'd been raised in this kind of context, and all of a sudden they're taken into this new one. Yeah,
where they had cleanish water available to them, where they had they had hard labor, but then there was food available to them. It was
interesting
on one of those things. So we shot there, and then the next day, which has really not a whole lot to do with Moses, it was kind of a rest day, but we made our way to Petra.
Right.
Not the band with John Schlitt.
Well, since you referenced old school, then I have to reference Keith Green's classic album and song. So You Want to Go Back to Egypt. That's for my Jesus record people out there. So.
Keith Green, that's a deep cut,
dude. So it's a classic. We need to play a little over the outro, a little. So You Want to Go Back to Egypt. So
okay, well, I'll see what I can pull off here for us. So we went to Petra, which, if you're not familiar with Petra, if you've seen Indiana Jones and Last Crusade, it's where they went in to find the cup of Christ. Yeah. But it's this beautiful. Facade. I mean, it's a facade that they've carved into this rock. This building facade that they've carved into rocks,
because it doesn't really go back in there, right? I mean,
it's a room.
Yeah, right.
It's just like a small room. This work,
like a cafe.
I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's like a small, nice cafe. Like, how long did it take? Who planned it?
And they don't know.
Who cut it out? And then it's like, you know what? This is a callback to earlier in the episode. You built this huge pyramid, and the best you can give me is a 4 foot by 4 foot shaft to go down into it. And then, like, you carved this whole facade, and the best you can do is a 12 by 15 room.
Huh.
So anyway, this is a little bit of Ryan coming out here. So, but it was cool, very cool. We go down this kind of a slot.
It's called the Valley of the Moon, right? Something like that.
Or they call it the Seek. I don't. So, we did it the American way because we had a lot of work to get done, and we rode golf carts down it. So we rented golf carts. It's pretty cool. All these suckers are walking, and we're like, beep, beep, get out of our way.
We're important. Get out of our way.
Yeah, look at me. I looked real important at that point as I've been washing my clothes in a sink. So we went in there, we saw that, and then but I mean, so this became the capital of Edom at some point. Okay. So Esau, they were the second occupiers of this, because at some point it just got abandoned. But this also became the capital, which is an important thing as far as the Israelites' journey with Joshua and the Edomites, and letting them through.
The difficulty they had with that.
Yeah, things didn't, So we saw that we got some cool shots there. And again, it was interesting to see the history of a place, and the people that had lived there and what they had done. We climbed up another mountain to see another building or another facade that they had carved, and just made a small room in. They called the monastery.
What do they know why they did that, or is there just speculation?
I don't know. I mean, it's they lived in caves. I mean, so you saw there's like a lot of caves up there, and then they had tombs. Like these big, like the tombs were elaborate and so forth, but. These other stuff was just like, hey, bro, you need a room? Let me carve out the side of a mountain for you.
Very cool.
So anyway, so we did that, and then the final thing, and this is the culmination. This is where it was all leading. We went to Mount Nebo, which is the mountain that Moses was taken up to and saw the promised land.
Right.
But he didn't get to partake in. But it was that was a really interesting, because you could see the Dead Sea right there. You could see Israel. Right. It was a little hazy, but you could see you're not too far from anything at this point. And so to go up there, and we were there in the dry season, so things were a little bit browner, but you could still see the green again. You know what I mean? Like the green would have come up. They said if we'd been there at a different season, like the green would have come up so much further.
Right.
And so just to come out of Petra, which was desert, hot, deserty, to come out of Wadi Rum, the wilderness, and then you come up onto Mount Nebo, and you look out, and it would have been green.
There's from the wilderness to the promised land. That's
from the wilderness to the promised land. It's going from the lushness of the Nile, but captivity, to wandering in the desert because of disobedience, and then going up to this mount, and finally and seeing, there is the life that they felt like they had left was in front of the true life was in front of them.
Right. Interesting.
So it was that when we were up there as the sun was setting, and it was just that was a cool experience. We were that was it, where we wrapped things up there, and just to have a few moments up there by ourselves where we weren't worrying about. We'd already captured everything we needed to capture, and just to be up there and to think about that experience and what Moses had been through and what we felt like we had been through.
But for not 40 years, right?
Not 40 years, but it's like, man, I felt like this was pretty rough with trains, planes, and automobiles, and they're on foot. And I did it for 2 weeks, did it for 40 years, but kind of feeling like. What that moment would have felt like to see that plain, to see the valley, to see, to see a life in front of them.
Cool. Is that your main takeaway, or is there anything else spiritually or biblically it really made you think about?
I just you think about I reflected on myself as. Going through like it's one of that trust that was required, the trust that was needed, because that was really for me, like, as we were in Wadi Rum, as we were in the desert and we saw this stuff, it's just like the trust that it required, and that sometimes it's leading through a desert, like there's that there is something to be led through, but and then that even in the desert, the promise is still there. You know what I mean? Right. Like we've talked about that, like it's the book of Revelation,
right?
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you're going to go through these trials or so forth, but kind of going, we taught about, we came back and we teach, third and fourth graders. Yeah. And it was about manna. It was a story about Exodus and manna. Okay. And that God only gave him enough manna for the day. For today. And like, well, why? Yeah. Why only today? And I'm like, because that is trust. You know what I mean? Like that is the ultimate trust. Having seen this and experienced this, like that's the ultimate trust me moment. And so I think just leaving, choosing to walk into that and thinking to lead a whole, it's one thing for a small group of people to make plans to go through that, but for a nation, for a people, like it requires an act of God. You know what I mean? Like this requires God acting for this to happen. This is not even just for the Egyptians. Not even if the Egyptians weren't a military power and were chasing them, but to move a people through these lands, through the wilderness into this.
Well, it makes me think of manna differently. I mean, just your description of how isolated and desolate and just out there it is. That's you don't often picture that when you picture them going out and gathering. Like again, I've always pictured them. Oh, it's kind of like shrubs, like gathering berries, that kind of thing. But it's the middle of nowhere.
Again, like Wadi Rum. I mean, I knew what to expect. I mean,
Sure.
it's like desert. And I mean, it's not like the Sahara where it's just, rolling.
Right.
We've got mountains and so forth, but like there is no vegetation here. Like there is nothing. And it's there is no shade. There is no it's
And
you're
the water,
just there's no water. You
from
are
the
exposed.
rock.
Yeah, and for me not to get, I think it's always easy for me to get arrogant and think I wouldn't have made those decisions like the Israelites to complain about water.
Right.
But I mean, I think it's easy for us to feel that way. But I mean, I told our fixers in every country, like, hey, have cases of water and ask every crew member every 30 minutes if they need water. Because I mean, it was just like, it's dangerous. And it happens so fast. And it's just like, now I'm at the Egyptians and the Jordanians drink less water than us. They're more adapted to it, but still, like, just like what your needs are, you would be totally dependent on someone else. Like if your truck breaks down, George. So that was
Cool.
That was and just that God is leading you when it doesn't feel like He's leading you.
Right. Well, this has been a long episode already, but let me. I just got two questions for you, kind of, because we're the bistro, and we're all about the food and the drink. So, did you drink the guy's coffee? Did you have any of that coffee, or was it?
I did not. I'm going to say something.
Okay.
They have really terrible coffee in Egypt and Jordan.
Really. Okay. That's
but I will say they do something different. So it's much different than ours. It's weaker. Typically,
really, huh?
And the guy's coffee by the river was like instant coffee. So I'm like,
okay, no.
And it was questionable where the water was coming from. So I'm like,
well, that was hard about that.
I got to take care of my stomach. But my host will. That guy, I'm going to direct him to drink it. So we did that, but we did have it, in Jordan. We went to this place and we bought, again, like they're intrigued by like Americans. They want to talk to us. And I mean, they know our pop culture and they want to talk to us. And so like I was in with our director of photography and he bought some chocolate for his wife. Like it was, high-end chocolate. And he's like, oh, let me just give you some coffee too. Like he just gives it, and it had cardamom in it, like raw cardamom in it. And so it was like, he pours it, and then it's like to me it was like this is like a spiced tea with like stuff floating on it. So I didn't drink that other coffee. So I came back to good coffee. Okay, and so forth.
What about food? What did you have anything that you enjoyed eating? I really could picture the up on Mount Sinai, the chicken dinner over the coals. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. So I have to say something that's funny. Of course, there are no ham or pig products.
Right.
And so
you're not gonna get a pork chop.
There's no pork chop. So the first night we go to, it's a Syrian restaurant in Cairo.
Okay.
And our fixer's like, they have like gyros, and he's like, do you want chicken or meat? And I was like, meat? Like, is chicken not a meat? And what are you describing? What are you defining as meat? Right. But so we had like a gyro there, and then they had, again, it's like, how many different ways can I prepare chicken or beef? And so they had chicken that they had marinated over like charcoal, and they had like a just big charcoal grill inside this restaurant. And it was amazing. But then we ate in Wadi Rum, we stayed at this one place, and what they do is they've got like a 3-tiered system, and on the bottom they have rice, and on top, and then in the middle they had lamb, and then on top they had chicken. And then what they did is they set it down on the ground, like they got a hot pit, and they set this whole thing down on the ground and they put hot coals on top. And so it cooked like that for like all day. And so when they pull it out, like all the drippings have fallen into the rice.
Oh my goodness.
And so what they do is they put in a big thing. And so, you're just pulling off lamb and chicken and this rice that it's like had the juices from it.
That sounds good.
Boo, it did. Yeah, it was real good. It was real good.
That's
good.
So
that was, we had some really good meals, and I also ate McDonald's in Jordan. So
were you glad to see it by that point? It's like, give me something
part
familiar.
of it was a joke because I got nicknamed Big Tasty by our drivers because I gave them names. And so they're like, but the thing was, like they said, we have the best McDonald's. And I'm like, come on, it's McDonald's. And they're like, no, we have the best McDonald's. And we have these fantastic Big Tasties. So I'm like, well, we got to eat McDonald's while we're
they
here
good?
then. It was actually way better than any American McDonald's and cleaner. Like it was very clean.
Yeah.
But again, I don't want to set the bar too high here, but it was very clean. And I got to say, the Big Tasty was delicious.
Oh, okay.
But
there you
again,
go.
this was towards the end of the trip, and you're just like, I need some American grease. You know what I mean?
Oh, goodness.
So,
Well,
anyway.
sounds like you had a great trip. I'm glad.
We
I'm
had
glad you're back.
We had a
and-
great trip.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're back in the bistro with you.
Yeah, we should be back. We're going to be actually back, hopefully, the Lord willing, in person together next time. You should see us together. We got some things
Brian's
planned.
gonna make this
Got
as
some things
awkward as
upcoming.
possible. Hopefully,
No,
the
I'm
next
getting- I'm
time
getting ready
that
to
I
make it more-
speak, there we're here for there might be
I'm
together.
going to make it even more awkward in just a moment. So yeah, join us
Lord.
next week. What do we know what's going on? We don't know what's going on yet, but we'll have something.
We will
and it'll
talk
be
about
good.
something relating to theology, the Bible, or the
anything
Christian
pertaining
life.
to the Christian faith. Yeah, we have some upcoming interviews
Work on
we've
some
got
guests.
planning, and so
We got some guests. We know everybody loves
stay
them.
tuned.
Loves,
And keep
loves
sharing.
a good guest.
Keep sharing
Yes,
because
keep
we're starting to
sharing.
get a few more listens and that kind of thing. It's really nice. So
Because sharing is caring,
yeah. So make
and also becoming a patron is caring.
yeah. Do remember we have those things. If you go to our website, you can find you can click a link to become a Patreon and support the bistro. And
We would greatly appreciate it.
yeah, there's,
So
you
we
get a
hope you're
little-
all enjoying it, and we
things,
will.
yeah. So next
we'll see
week,
you
come
next-
back for Big Tasty and Brian's Bible Bistro.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, Brian. Talk to you later.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.